67 countries invited to join the 15th Summit of BRICS leaders in South Africa with focus on inclusive multilateralism. Is this alliance to weaken Western dominance in the global economic structure? Also on the program, ECOWAS imposed sanctions on Niger continue to take toll on businesses in Niger borders. This is Africa Update on Trust TV, reaching you from Abuja, Nigeria's capital. I am Ayuba Ilya. Thanks for joining. The BRICS nations, namely Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, accounts for 40% of the world population with a combined GDP of $23 trillion, which is about 27% of the global economy. According to the theme of the 15th Summit of BRICS, discussions are around partnership for mutually accelerated growth, sustainable development, and inclusive multilateralism. Amidst the Russia-Ukraine war, about 40 countries are seeking to join the BRICS. Some observers have described the alliance as a game changer in the global political economy. To unpack some of the issues around the BRICS summit, South Africa High Commissioner to Nigeria, Thami Dennis Mseleku, joins me on Africa Update. Thank you so much for joining us, Commissioner, on Africa Update today.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right. Well, perhaps we should begin by talking about how prepared South Africa is to host this summit.
Well, South Africa is very, very prepared to host the summit. In fact, we have hosted a number of pre-summit activities, ministerial meetings in various sectors that are strategic to the BRICS. For example, the last one was actually on the prevention of pandemics, because we come from the COVID-19 situation and we have learned certain lessons, and together in the BRICS community we are trying to see whether we have strategies to prevent this. We've had similar ones on health, on economic and trade. We've had others on agriculture. We've had a number of ministerial meetings up to now. So we are actually ready for the actual summit.
All right. Now, a lot of talk about the BRICS, and we're wondering, should BRICS be considered an alternative for the global south in light of the imbalance in the existing global financial architecture, talking about World Bank and IMF?
Well, what is good about BRICS in terms of its objectives is to ensure that we create an environment of progressive multilateralism, which is inclusive and which is actually not dominated by single forces and unilateral decision-making, etc., etc. So the Global South is actually beginning to say, we want a voice, we want to be part of the international community, we want a stake on the table, and therefore BRICS shouldn't be seen just as an alternative as of itself, but as an alternative approach to the way the world should be governed, which should be inclusive and should ensure that it's developmental and not necessarily exclusive and benefiting a few. That is what it is exactly.
Okay. Now, South Africa, as the only African country in BRICS, has trade deficit with other member countries. Where does that leave the country in terms of mutual benefits in that group?
Interestingly enough, in fact, as a result of that, South Africa has an opportunity now to be actually trading with the other BRICS countries. In fact, South African trade with BRICS countries has actually increased by about 21% since about 2019 or so. So you see the benefits for the country that we are beginning to close that deficit. But it also means that we as a country, because we don't see ourselves as merely the country within BRICS and outside the African continent, we got into BRICS on the mandate of ensuring that the African continent is not included in this South-South relations. And therefore, our objective is to ensure that the Africa Free Trade Agreement is actually implemented. And the BRICS countries, all of them are trading with Africa. And so we must make sure that they trade fairly with Africa and they actually deal with Africa in a manner that is inclusive and that is developmental as well as sustainable. So that is why the objectives of BRICS are about expanding that kind of mandate.
With the presence of China and Russia, in BRICS, now South Africa is part of that, many people are wondering, what is the impact of, this South Africa relationship with the Western part of the world, since joining BRICS?
We as South Africa regard ourselves as an independent country. We have our own national interests, and on the basis of our national interest, we have established relations with a number of countries, both north and south, and we continue to have those relations based on our national interest. However, we have them on the basis of the principles that we have a right to engage with anybody we want to engage with on the basis of our own national interest. And from time to time, we will have engagements with other parties in relation to who we are actually supporting or who we are friends with. We always maintain that we are not going to be dictated upon in relation to who we can be friends with. But at the same time, we are friendly to everybody as long as it is in the interest of humanity.
All right. Now, 40 countries are seeking to join BRICS. Where does South Africa stand with regards to the issues of expansion of the BRICS, and what will that impact be?
Well, if you remember very well, BRICS started as the 3 countries without South Africa. So the issue of expansion of BRICS was actually right at the beginning in 2009 when we knocked at the door to say, but you can't leave Africa out of this. It's not just Asia and the South Americas. It's a South-South issue, and Africa is a very important player. And at the moment, we would like to come in and therefore expand BRIC into BRICS. And of course, in 2011, we finally actually joined in. And our mandate was clearly to ensure that at the end of the day, we push the agenda of expansion, particularly with regard to the African continent as such. And that is why in our first meeting where we were chairing BRICS, we decided to actually create a BRICS Plus concept where we invited heads of state from the African continent to actually meet with the BRICS after the BRICS Summit and as an expanded group. So that expansion started in South Africa. And the other members of BRICS, whenever they hosted, they actually emulated South Africa and expanded. And that is why many of the countries that have applied because they've experienced the engagement with the BRICS countries. And we have about 23 countries that have shown direct interest by applying for expansion. And as you said, we have about 67 of them that are showing interest, even just verbally and so on. And so we are very much supportive. Of course, the process is, let's look at maybe what kind of principles will determine that expansion. And this BRICS Summit, we hope, will then actually adopt those principles and therefore expand the membership of BRICS.
Okay. Now, how would the single currency plan by BRICS impact on South Africa's economy?
Look, we are of the view that any attempt to ensure that we have alternative currencies and we can all trade in different currencies actually frees us from the blackmail around a single currency, because we cannot really take our independent positions, because we're then blackmailed into actually by that single currency. So if we have a situation where BRICS creates another currency, as long as it's not going to be a currency that really will muzzle the rest of the other possible currencies that are actually likely to emerge. We believe that once we have that currency, the BRICS currency, if we are actually able to move in that direction, it will actually benefit us, because we are going to be able to trade in a single currency, which is alternative to the dominant currencies at the moment.
There are those who argue that some of the countries seeking to join BRICS do not share certain democratic values such as human rights, justice, and so on. They consider joining BRICS as a way of escaping from, some of the sanctions that they may be imposed on, their countries. How do you respond to those arguments?
Well, you can approach this matter in actually two or three ways. One is the question is they're escaping from who? Because at the moment, we have the United Nations and its structures that determine whether countries are actually rogue countries or not. And some of the countries are actually determined by one bloc to be said to be rogue countries in particular ways. So if they actually feel that they are being muzzled, not necessarily because of the objective multilateral structures, but because they are not liked by some individual country, some big power, then they have a right to actually find alternatives. But that alternative also has to actually establish its own principles, and that is why we are beginning to talk about what are the principles that are going to allow certain countries to come into BRICS or not to come into BRICS? And those principles have to be open and objective, and so everybody can actually determine that indeed the country A could not join BRICS because of this principle, not because some power believes they don't like them or because they are not actually serving their interests. So we are not necessarily worried about the yardsticks that are being used. BRICS is going to use its own yardsticks.
Of course, I wouldn't end this interview without talking about the electricity crisis in South Africa. If you may, talk to us about what the government is doing to restore normalcy in that regard.
Well, our electricity crisis is actually a very serious crisis for us in South Africa. And so the government has actually taken a number of measures. One of the key ones that was recent was the appointment of a focused minister who would actually just be focusing on ensuring that we do away with these blackouts. And since he started and has focused on a number of options to look at how we can quickly get out of this situation of the blackouts from time to time, we have seen tremendous improvement. And in fact, we are very optimistic that by the end of this year and by next year, we'll have totally eliminated the problem in general, and then focus on some of the, well, parallel to that, of course, we're focusing on the development of alternative generation capacity as well as distribution capacity and other measures that are going to ensure that we never return to this kind of crisis. But we're solving it. Right now, we are no longer in the dark, deep end that we were moving towards. We are more or less seeing the light at the end of the tunnel.
Of course, also one of the major issues of discussion on the continent is about the coup in Niger, and I'm wondering what the position of South Africa is on what's happening there.
I want to be very clear that we as a country, first of all, believe in multilateralism, and therefore we are a member of the African Union, and we are very, very firm. The African Union and its principles were adopted in South Africa, and would never be the first ones to undermine the principles governing the African Union. And one of those principles is that we are actually going to do everything in our power to deal with the coups that have been besettling the African continent. And therefore, we are totally against any change of power other than through democratic means. And therefore, even in Niger, we're very clear about it. We do not support, as a country, but as part of the African Union, we do not support any kind of change of regime which is not through democratic processes. Secondly, we support the efforts of the ECOWAS, led by His Excellency President Bola Tinubu, to actually try and settle the problems of Niger. We support the initiatives to engage and find all possible means to ensure that that situation is brought to normalcy. We, through the African Union, will play our role in actually supporting whatever activities led by ECOWAS, and would never actually stand outside that. That's the position of our country.
All right. Well, Thami Dennis Mseleku, South Africa High Commissioner, thank you so much for joining us on Africa Update and sharing on these topics. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, you're watching Africa Update on Trust TV. After the break, we take a look at how ECOWAS imposed sanctions on Niger is taking toll on businesses in Nigeria and Niger borders. Join us again. Welcome back. This is Africa Update on Trust TV, reaching you from Abuja, Nigeria's capital. Now, marketers in the border community of Ilela International Market have decried low patronage following the decision of ECOWAS to close all borders with Niger. Our correspondent reports that the market, which is between Nigeria and Niger, has been operating despite the fears of a possible military intervention by ECOWAS to restore democratic governance in Niger. Abubakar Imam has more.
The international market, which holds every Sunday, used to attract people from Niger, Mali, and even Burkina Faso, who either bring in their goods or come to buy our local products. Goods worth hundreds of millions are traded in this market, thus making it one of the largest international markets in the sub-Sahara region. But those foreign nationals have stopped coming since the border with the Niger Republic was shut down, leaving the local traders and customers lamenting over the poor turnout. One of the traders, Yahya Amarawa, said they were only attending the market as a symbolic gesture, but not for trading to make profits. Amarawa said the reason for the low turnout of customers in the market is the hike in the prices of some of the commodities due to their scarcity following the border closure. The market is not getting even one-third of its usual population. This has been a source of worry to us because we are not making any profit. We are only attending the market as a symbolic gesture. We pray and hope that our leaders will reconsider their decision because local businesses are negatively affected by the border closure. It also hikes prices of commodities. Can you imagine that a bag of corn costs as high as 50,000 naira now? We have never experienced this before. If you are selling 100 bags before, now you only sell 25 or 30 bags because we are no longer getting the patronage of the foreign nationals. They fear possible military action against the Nigerian military junta. Even those that usually come in on donkeys and motorcycles through the bush paths have stopped. It is the same lamentation at the animal section of the market as the soaring prices as a result of their scarcity said to be scaring people away from the markets. The business has not been flourishing for long because of the naira depreciation. The situation is further compounded by the recent border closure. Before, we were buying a donkey in Niger Republic at the cost of 40,000 sefa, which was roughly 30,000 naira. But 40,000 CFA is equivalent to 50,000 naira now. We used to get donkeys from Niger, Mali and Algeria until they stopped coming in. Prices of sheep have also gone up due to their scarcity in the market. From Ilela Border Post, Abubakar Awal Imam, Trust TV News, Ilela, Sokoto.
There is strict compliance with the directives of the federal government of Nigeria by the security operatives at both entry and exit points of Niger Border. Petty traders and others offering ease of transportation, mostly commercial trade cyclists, are also living in a tight situation amid fear due to the border closure between Nigeria and Niger Republic. We are in a very tight situation. Everybody is just managing, but not happy. Relationship, businesses have been cut off. Everything has gone sideways. We get what we eat and feed our family here. A day, at least I get 7,000 to 8,000, but now we'll only get 700 naira, or at most 1,000 naira. According to residents and businessmen, all activities have been brought to a halt as most businesses have been cut off by the development. Within this week alone, this issue has brought hardship to our people, both in Niger and Nigeria. The relationship between us is long since the days of our forefathers. I used to go and buy camels, but since the time this started, I have not gone anywhere. There is fear and confusion, especially we that are living here at the border. Between us and Nigerians, it's just the border, but we are one. All relationships have been brought to a halt. Both of us are imprisoned. We are really suffering. Niger Border is one of the biggest, active and popular sharing boundaries with Guru and Machina in Yobe states, while on the other side, shares border with Babbamutum, Zango and Mai Adua border stations in Katsina state. Adari is the immediate community in Niger Republic from Nigeria's Megatari, with a neighboring village, Jobi, also sitting on the borderline between the two countries. Currently, there is no movement from all entry and exit points, with the exception of security officials. Salim Umar Ibrahim, reporting for Trust TV.
The Economic Community of West African States says most of its member states are ready to participate in a standby force that could intervene in Niger following a coup there late last month. Defense chiefs from the 15-member regional bloc met in Accra on Thursday as part of latest efforts to overturn the ouster of Mohamed Bazoum, Niger's president, who was deposed in a July 26 coup. ECOWAS Commissioner Abdul Fattah Musa said on Thursday that all member states except those under military rule and Cape Verde are ready to participate in the standby force. The meeting to discuss Niger's crisis comes after an August 6 deadline passed for Moutinho's soldiers to release and reinstate Bazoum or face military intervention. Bazoum remains under house arrest with his wife and son in the capital, Niamey. The bloc has long deliberated on the use of force, which it described as a last resort, for weeks due to several mediation teams it sent to Niamey and also due to a lack of consensus within its ranks. Burkina Faso and Mali, which have experienced multiple coups since 2020, warned that any military intervention in Niger would be declared as an act of war, revealing a fracture in the region between its coastal countries and those in the volatile Sahel. Guinea, which is also under military rule and which has condemned any external aggression, has refrained from making any other comments. The top security body of the African Union met Monday to consider whether it will support military intervention, but has yet to make public its decision. And that wraps it up on Africa Update. You can watch more via all our social media platforms and also on our YouTube live stream. Join us next week for another time on the program. I am Ayuba Ilya. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.